Okay, go for it. Parking brake is on. Yeah, go for it.
What do I start at? Just go up to 2?
Yeah, 2 to 3. Just go back and forth to 2 to 3. Yeah, the battery's not too happy. Let me get it started from here, and then get into it as soon as it starts, okay? Fuel pump on? Go for it. So as you saw, last night we ran some break-in on this engine. We got maybe 10 or 15 minutes between 2 and 3,000 RPM, but the temperature gauge started reading pretty high, so we shut it off. There must have been an air bubble in the engine somewhere. And then as you heard, when we shut it off, we got a pretty righteous backfire, but I'm pretty sure that's just the high RPM, and I'm not worried about that unless it keeps doing it while shutting it off at idle. I had filled the radiator a bit while it was running, but it was just kind of making a mess, so I shut it and meant to get back to it, but before I did, the temperature gauge was reading pretty high, so we just shut it off to be safe. So now, it's the next day, and I want to run maybe 10 more minutes of break-in on this thing. I've checked all the fluids and topped off the radiator and such. Everything still looks great. I have the front end in the air for 2 reasons. One, because that puts the radiator cap even higher above the engine, so that should theoretically help getting out any extra air. And also because I'm going to bleed the power steering system by turning the wheels lock to lock a handful of times. So from sitting inside, I can read the coolant gauge on the dash, the tach mounted outside, and the oil pressure gauge mounted outside. Oil pressure looked fantastic through that whole run. It's kind of hard to say how good it actually is since it wasn't idle or anything, but it started off around 70 psi and dropped down to maybe mid-50s by the end. And I have this fan here just to give a little bit of extra air since this thing isn't moving. But I actually don't think it'll be a problem, because that was an issue we had last night. But why not? And I'm wearing ear protection this time because this thing is still really loud at 2,000 to 3,000 RPM. It's been running break-in for 15 or 20 minutes now. I'll run a little bit longer and then just let it idle and see what it sounds like, I guess. Okay, it still sounded good there. I didn't really want to idle at the end there, it just kind of shut off, so I'm going to mess with the mixture adjustment. I'm going to have to set timing, and I'll turn the idle speed screw up for now, and then we'll see how low we can get it later. Okay, now we're gonna set the timing. I have plugged the vacuum advance with some high-tech equipment, and we will roll this just far enough outside the garage door so that the exhaust is outside, but the engine is inside because it's much easier to see the timing light in the dark. And then we hook the timing light probe around the number 1 cylinder spark plug wire, and then we aim it right down in there at the timing pointer, and with this advanced light set to 0 degrees, you'll be able to see how many degrees before top dead center it's firing. We're looking for probably around 10 for this engine. And then we'll also check total timing, which is as far as the mechanical advance will bring it. Now that we have the timing set where we want it, we can tighten down the distributor hold-down clamp. It's not the worst idea to do this while the engine is running, but I've already got it reasonably tight, so I think it'll be fine. This is my favorite kind of distributor wrench. This thing seems to reach pretty much anything. So now we have the truck set up with a solid initial tune. The timing is 12 initial, 32 total. Idle is 600 to 700 RPM while in park, which comes out to 5 to 550 while it's in drive. Throttle shaft kind of has some play to it, so depending on where it settles down, that's why it has a bit of a range to that. The TV is set via the automatic adjuster, which is just you push it all the way in and then open the throttle all the way. You'll hear it click a couple times. Vacuum is 18 inches of mercury in park and 16 in drive, which is significantly less than this engine pulled before, even with its bad rings. So that means the cam is definitely doing something different. Previously in drive, this would pull high 18s. This thing was sitting and idling for a good while after reaching operating temperature, so it certainly could get hotter, and it's not a very hot day. It's like 50 degrees Fahrenheit here. But the lowest idle oil pressure I saw in park was 32 psi and 29 psi in drive. That's really good, especially considering our clearances. A small block Chevy really only needs single-digit pressure at idle, so this is totally fine. As the bearings wear a little bit, as everything kind of wear mates, that will drop a little bit, but it's so good right now. I'll stick to 10W40 and I don't think I'll have to worry about it. Also good news, all the leaks seem to have stopped. There's only a very slow oil drip in the back, and I'm pretty sure that's from the oil pressure sender. So now what I'm going to do is reconnect the vacuum advance, pull all these gauges off, reinstall the actual oil pressure sender, get the hood back on, and go for a drive. Some guys like to change the oil immediately after break-in. I'll give it like 50 or 100 miles, and then change the oil, and then do another couple of hundred, and then change it again, and then you're on a regular oil change interval. I'll also go out to a nice empty road and try to break the piston rings in, which is like a mild acceleration to 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and then just let off the gas and let the engine brake back down, and do that a handful of times. It survived! That drive was something like hour and a half long. Didn't really have any issues. Oil pressure looked good the whole time. I don't really trust the numbers on that gauge, but it looked like it was maybe low 20s at idle at the end, which if that number is correct, is still very good. It definitely feels fast enough to be dangerous. The exhaust still sounds bad. It's kind of loud and kind of whiny, and it's unpleasant. I do not care for the exhaust. I'm gonna have to do something about that eventually, but it's not a concern for the moment. I got some pretty good deceleration runs in there, so hopefully the piston rings are all broken in now. I spun one of the tires at like 30 miles an hour. These tires are just garbage, so it's gonna need that. But man, it's driving again. I've broken and fixed this thing so many times. It's almost not even the same truck it started out as, but I'm starting to grow fond of whatever it is now. And yeah, that's totally fine still. Oops. We just have to figure out how to get this wrench off of there. Now that we have